So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about some various sports improvements. This is something that I've thought a lot about in my life. And if you've watched things that I put on my channel already, you know I can go way off the deep end as far as my ideas. I can almost to the point where it's a complete redesign of the sport. I've got an idea in the back of my head of basketball with power plays like they have in hockey, or basketball where free throws get taken from the spot of the foul. All sorts of crazy things like that. So here I'm going to try and rein myself back a little bit and talk about smaller incremental improvements that could be made to the various sports. I'm going to start with soccer, and I do call it soccer for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm an American, and that's what we call it here. It's not meant to be any kind of a slight against the game. It merely distinguishes it from gridiron football. So I think that's reason enough. And by the way, it's a British term to begin with anyways, and is not the least bit offensive. All it means is that I'm an American. So today I'm going to talk about soccer because, to be honest, I really like soccer quite a lot. I played it when I was a little kid. I didn't play it up to the high school level, but I played it up into middle school. And I'm coaching an elementary school team now, having fun with it. And I certainly enjoy watching the World Cup. I like to root for the USA in the World Cup, and I otherwise, enjoy the game a good bit. I'm only a very casual fan of the English Premier League, to be honest, but nevertheless, it's something I like to talk about, and rules in general are something that I find very interesting. So, what are we going to talk about in soccer? Well, I'm going to talk about penalties because I believe that that is where the greatest room for improvement with the least change can be made. Obviously, I could get into all sorts of things like the way that the card system works and should they have a sin bin, as the soccer folks like to say, which I think would be a good idea. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Most specifically, I recently saw an interesting video from Tifo football that I'll be happy to link in the description here, where they actually go into some numbers and show just how overpowered penalties actually are in soccer. And they are very, very overpowered. And so here I'm going to talk through a little bit of, why that is, why that's a problem, and what we can do about it. So let's talk generally at the highest level. When an infraction occurs in any sport, what do we want to do about it? So we typically want to do something to correct the infraction. And our goals are first to compensate the offended by granting them some kind of an equivalent status to what you would have had if the infraction hadn't been committed. So for those of you familiar with gridiron football, think about pass interference in the NFL. You figure, well, if the pass interference penalty hadn't been committed, then the receiver would have caught the ball. So what are we going to do? Well, we're basically going to pretend that that catch happened. We're going to give a penalty that gives them the ball at the spot of that foul, right? You can also think of something like goaltending in basketball. If the goaltending hadn't happened, the basket would have gone in. So we're going to count that basket, right? Then second bullet point, the other thing you might want to do is to punish or penalize the offending team in order to detour, yes, I can spell, to deter infractions from happening in the first place. All right, so in this case, we're thinking something along the lines of, well, it's not enough to simply reset the game to what it would have been, but we need to make it a little bit better for the offended team so that we won't even have these infractions happening in the first place. And some folks may even use soccer penalties as kind of this is the bullet where they'll hone in on it and say, hey, it's good that it's more severe because that's what we want to do. We want to punish the team from having that kind of from even committing these fouls in the first place, right? Sometimes games are okay with certain tactical infractions, and so then you might not need to have this kind of a punish. And I'll go back to basketball, for example. In basketball, it's considered perfectly okay to give a tactical foul. You just simply commit a foul, the other team gets their free throws, and you're trying to get the ball back, right? I might argue that, hey, that means that the free throws are not a severe enough penalty. And I think if you look at the way basketball goes, that's clearly the case, because then they have things like bonus and flagrant fouls and fouling out, and they just keep ramping up the penalty for that. But you'll see the same thing in soccer as well sometimes. Even on penalties, sometimes you see penalties that aren't severe enough, and I'll get to that in a second as well. I also say that the infraction correction has to compensate for inconsistent officiating. So imagine a penalty in gridiron football, such as intentional grounding. The penalty for intentional grounding is that they move the ball back to the spot of the foul and you lose the down. Well, that essentially just sets you up to where you would have been if you had gotten the sack, right? And it basically makes it a free roll for the quarterback. Free roll for those of you familiar with poker, right? The quarterback may as well just throw the ball into the ground and hope that for whatever reason the official is not going to call it. And if the official does call it, oh well, then they're in the same spot they would have been anyways. And if they don't, then hey, you just got away with something, right? So you actually need to make it a little bit more severe so that people won't be committing the fouls just on the chance that the official won't won't make the call. Okay. So going to soccer specifically, this is kind of the hierarchy of the way that infraction correction works in soccer. All right. So at the lowest level, we have throw-in, goal kick, and corner kick. And you probably don't even consider those to be infractions, and that's fine. I'm not going to get into a debate about whether it's an infraction or not, but I think we're pretty much all in agreement that it's perfectly fine to tactically kick the ball out of bounds and then let the play be restarted with according to whatever it is with the other team getting the ball. That's just a part of the game. Nobody really, I think, has a problem with that. And so that's the lowest level. All right, the next level is an indirect free kick and then a direct free kick, which are awarded for certain types of fouls. And then the penalty kick, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And then we have yellow and red cards and fines and suspensions. Now, the fines and suspensions I put with a little bit of a break because that's not really a part of the game, right? The referee, at least not directly, is not fining or suspending anyone. The referee, the highest that they can go up to is red cards and penalty kicks. So, hey, are these infractions the right result? Are these corrections the right result for these types of infractions? Not very often, to be honest. But I'm going to get specifically into penalties. On these other ones, there's definitely also cases. Again, not throw-in and goal kick. I just put that as an example of the lowest type of infraction correction. I'm fine with all of that. But the indirect and direct free kicks and penalty kicks and the cards, yeah, I feel like there's problems with all sorts of things with that. And this didn't manage to come through, but other sports that have penalty shots, well, we've got hockey and basketball, right? So we have soccer, hockey, and basketball. In hockey, they sometimes have penalty shots, but it's very rare. Penalty shots are basically only awarded when a player has a clear breakaway with a chance at the goal. And then the penalty shot itself is not super likely to score, especially compared to what we see in soccer. I don't remember the numbers, but it's 10 or 20% of times that they actually score on the penalty shot. In basketball, of course, they call them free throws, but that's essentially a penalty shot in basketball, and we have multiples of those every game. So it becomes much, much more common in basketball. Both of those things have elements to them that I think soccer could adopt, and I'll get to those in a minute. All right. So first, I'm going to do kind of this concession slide, though. Some reasons that I've heard as arguments for why we should just keep penalties the way that they are in soccer. The first one I hear is, oh, it's more goals, which makes for a more exciting game. I disagree with that. I think that penalty kick goals are not interesting to watch, and they're super frustrating if you believe that the penalty kick was awarded unfairly. And by the way, when the penalty kick was awarded fairly, it's also still super frustrating when they miss. So there's some cases where it just does not seem to be the appropriate result for the foul, at least in my eyes. And by the way, I'm using fair not in terms of were the rules followed correctly, but in terms of, hey, is this a fair result of that sort of a play? If you watch the Tifo football video, they talk about cases where there's a foul over towards the edge of the penalty area, and then we award a penalty kick for it. That is the rules, right? If I were a referee in a soccer game and I saw something like that, I would award a penalty kick because I enforce the rules as they are. But I don't think that that's what the rules should be. I think that that's way too harsh. All right. It encourages tighter defense, people say. I'm not convinced that that's true. I think you'd have to test it and play games without penalties to really see if that's the case. But I'm not convinced that that's true. And then it assesses the punishment. So we talked a little bit more about how you actually need to go a little bit, compensate a little bit more. The problem is that in soccer, you're going from a situation where a team had like a 10% chance of scoring to 80%. That's kind of over the top, I feel like. That's beyond Um, that's beyond what's appropriate, and so there's some problems with that. Um, yeah, the current system's too harsh in most cases. There's still some tactical conceding of penalties, so it kind of doesn't work every which way. We all know the case of those of us who follow the World Cup, anyways. We all know the case of Luis Suarez versus Ghana, and again, I have no problem with Luis Suarez and the way that he played that. He's playing the game he's given, but hey, the rules created a situation where the correct tactical thing to do is to swat the ball away from the line with your hands. You can concede the penalty kick and take the red card, and all of that is still better than what came from that. Like, to me, that seems like a problem with the rules. Um, yeah, maybe we can more appropriately compensate the offended team with something lesser than a penalty kick, um, you know, and discourage faking fouls by attacking players. To me, that's one of the biggest problems with penalty kicks is that it encourages attacking players to take dives in the penalty area in the hopes that maybe they can draw a call from the referee. I am not interested in watching a game of people diving and seeing who can trick the referee into getting a call for them. That's not a fun and interesting game. I want to see people actually playing proper soccer and see if we can manage to get some goals or great defense out of that. So here are some options for my proposed changes. I'm, again, as I always do on this channel, I'm talking about things the way that I think they should be. I'm not in any way trying to say that this is something I think would happen. I know that soccer fans around the world are probably saying, hey, you're an American, you should just shut up and be silent. That's typically the reaction I get when I try to talk about soccer. And, admittedly, sometimes I go way farther off with radical proposals. I'm trying not to do that here. All right. So what are some proposed changes? Well, the number one bullet point takes inspiration from basketball, which would be to require that the fouled player takes the kick. All right. So then you can't just put your best player out there to take the kick. The truth is that the team taking the penalty shot already has a big enough advantage as it is. We don't need to give them even more of an advantage for taking the kick. Same thing, by the way, with the goalkeeper. The trend in recent years has been to tighten up the restrictions on the goalkeeper, which of course makes scoring on the penalty even more likely. I think we need to go the other way with that and loosen up. Maybe even drop the rule that the goalkeeper has to be on their line. Let them come, a foot or two in front of the goal or whatever. I think, anything that would help to reduce the chances of scoring on the penalty would be good. I personally think it might be good to try and get the chance of scoring on a penalty kick down to about the 40 to 50% range, which of course would be a drastic change from what we have right now. Next bullet would be to separate the penalty kick from the run of play, so to do it kind of like they do in the penalty shootout at the end of knockout games. So you only get one kick, and we can do a restart following the failed penalty. How exactly you do the restart, I put some things on this slide, but I'm not too picky about that. My main point is that hey, you separate the penalty kick from the run of play. You're not going to be having people scoring off of rebounds and whatnot. Potentially move the penalty spot back. I don't know why 12 yards from the goal needs to be the sacred distance. Maybe it needs to be 13 or 14 or 15 yards. I don't know. And then the last bullet, which is the most radical change on this slide, is to require the penalty to be taken based on where the foul occurred. So, hey, if the foul occurs at the edge of the box, that's where you take the penalty kick from, is the edge of the box. That's the most radical proposal here. I would like it. I know that of everything that I've stated, that's the least likely. Not that any of these are particularly likely ever to see anyone actually testing them, but I do know that this last one is the least likely. So, but I do think it would be a good idea, right? We could simply, you could do the same thing, make everyone stay out of the box, give them a straight shot versus the goalie. But hey, if it's, if it's a penalty that occurred at the edge of the box, why shouldn't the kick be taken from the edge of the box? Sure, they're not likely to score. So what? They weren't likely to score to begin with. You still at least cleared the defense out in front of them, so they have a much better chance than they otherwise did. So that seems to be more appropriate to me. All right, a couple other things. So those were changes to the penalty kick itself. Now, a little bit about when we can give a penalty kick. I think it would be a good idea to award them only in goal scoring situations. So let's drop the idea that a foul in the box is a penalty kick. I know people who are really into soccer, that is like in their brain lots of times that this is just the way that it is, and you can't even think about changing it. Coming from my perspective, where I'm used to some other sports as well, there's no reason that it has to be that way. And so I think it might make sense to drop that idea and award penalties only in a case where a goal scoring situation is thwarted by a foul. a player has a clear break towards the goal or whatnot. Now, how can we determine what that is? Well, we can either give the referee discretion to be able to, and some guidance to be able to figure it out, which is kind of what they do in hockey, or we can kind of shrink down the penalty area. I think either of those would be an improvement. I prefer the first bullet point. Let's give the referee discretion on when it's a breakaway. And then the last bullet point is is to try to deal with these tactical penalty situations that come up from time to time. I actually do think, and this is the most radical here that I've got, but I actually do think it'd be a good idea to simply award a penalty goal. That is to say, goal is awarded. We don't even have to do a kick. This is, again, in that Luis Suarez type of situation. And again, I have nothing against Luis Suarez himself, okay? He played the game that he was given. But I think, yeah, if you swat the ball off of the line with your hand and you're not the goalie, then just call it a goal, right? The goal would have been scored, would have absolutely been scored if the foul hadn't happened. So just do it, right? That's actually a case where the penalty kick is not severe enough. I think much more often the penalty kick is far too severe, but yeah, those situations where it's not severe enough do come up, and I think maybe those should be dealt with as well. I do have opinions regarding red cards and yellow cards and when they should come up as well. Some of these situations, they're automatic red cards, and I think sometimes maybe they should be, sometimes they shouldn't be. As an American, it took me a long time to wrap my brain around the red card mentality in soccer, but that's kind of a tangent from this. Maybe I'll get back to it, but I'm not sure that I really want to put together a whole series of videos about my criticisms of soccer, because I actually do like the game. I like watching it. I like coaching it. It's fun. It's fun to be involved with, honestly. Just not by accident, I think that it's the most popular game in the world. But that said, I also think it's a game where I think some improvements could be made. And I do feel like more than most games, it's a game that gets like very entrenched in its traditions, particularly with the rules. So for those who are hardcore into soccer, I fully expect that nobody's going to like hardly anything that I had to say today, which I think is a shame. I think that there's a great deal of room for improvement in this here. And I believe that this area of fixing penalty kicks is actually the biggest bang for your buck, the one where soccer could improve the most. I have all sorts of other ideas about fixing the way that they do extra time, fixing the way that cards work, fixing the way substitutions work, et cetera, et cetera. But if you wanted to make one change to soccer, I think fixing penalties would be the way to do it. And so I think probably if I could pick just one bullet point on this, and in order to make the game better, I probably would do this last one here. Start taking penalties from angles. Now, if I want to try and pick a bullet point that I think could actually maybe someday happen, that would be an improvement. It would be this one. But of course, that's going to have the least impact. So this is require the fouled player to take the kick. I think I could imagine maybe that could get some support among soccer fans to someday be implemented. And I think it would be a good thing if it did. And the rest of these, I think, are very unlikely ever to even be considered seriously. So like I say, if I could pick one, it would be this one. If I thought one of these might happen, it would be this one. I think most likely none of these are ever going to happen. The trend seems to be going the other way. For whatever reason, it seems that there's a lot of folks out there that just love to see goals, even though it's a penalty kick goal. That's, should they even have had the penalty kick? And to me, that's just not interesting. I'm kind of like, gee, if all you want to see is more goals, why are you watching soccer, right? Go watch basketball, right? You'll see a whole lot more goals there. So in some ways, I just kind of don't get it. I have no problem with the fact that soccer is a low-scoring game. That's fine by me. I don't think we need to try to see more penalties in order to increase goals. If you want to increase goals, then let's adapt the rules of play to actually increase goals, which frankly, I don't think we need to do. I think the number of goals we see right now is fine. So anyways, I've rambled on about this for a while. This is me trying to kind of compromise with myself between the craziness that I would advocate versus what could theoretically, possibly, maybe someday happen, but probably wouldn't happen either. Anyways, by all means, engage, give comments and whatnot about what you think about all of this. I'd be happy to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Bye.